After we finished watching the Netflix series, my partner looked at me with a serious expression and said, "This Tuesday, I'm planning to take the kids and leave you forever." I never saw it coming. Hey Reddit, my name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. I live in Tampa with my wife Jessica, and we've been married for 4 years now. I work as a marketing coordinator for a decent company, and from the outside, life seems pretty good. That Tuesday night, everything changed in ways I never could have imagined. We were watching some movie on Netflix. Honestly, I can't even remember what it was about anymore. The credits started rolling, and the room got dim in that cozy way it does when you're settled in for the evening. Jessica leaned over the armrest in what seemed like a casual gesture, but something about her voice sounded different somehow. It was too polished, too planned, like she had rehearsed what she was about to say. "This Friday I plan to take the girls to that new cocktail lounge in Midtown," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "You cool with that?" I answered without really thinking about it, my mouth practically on autopilot. "Yeah, of course." But even as the words left my lips, something felt off about the whole interaction. I noticed she was still holding her phone, spinning it on her palm like a coin, a nervous habit I had never seen her do before. When I asked her which girls she meant, she blinked slower than normal, like someone buying time to think. Her eyes did that thing people's eyes do when they're lying. That slight shift, that momentary pause. "Oh, you know, the usual," she replied. "Sophie. Maybe Morgan from work." Here's the thing, though. Sophie had moved to Miami last month, and I had never heard of any Morgan before. My brain started taking mental notes, filing away these inconsistencies, but I didn't say anything. I just nodded and smiled, playing along with whatever game this was turning out to be. She got up to go to bed, arching her back slightly like she wanted me to notice. Her shirt lifted up just a little as she stretched, and that's when I saw it, a tan line across her waist. A tan line that I definitely didn't give her. That was Tuesday night, and that's when the first real crack appeared in what I thought was my solid marriage. Wednesday morning arrived like any other day, but I was already paying closer attention to everything. Jessica left her phone charging in the kitchen while she went upstairs, and that's when a notification popped up on the lock screen. It was from an unknown number, just 7 digits and a wink emoji, with a message that made my blood turn cold. "Your trouble." She came back downstairs a few minutes later and immediately saw the phone. Without hesitation, she deleted the notification quickly, thinking I was still in the bathroom. But I wasn't. I was watching from the hallway, taking more mental notes and still saying nothing. The pattern was becoming clearer, but I needed more pieces before I could see the full picture. That evening, Jessica came home late with an excuse about traffic being insane. She delivered this explanation with practiced ease, but I had actually checked the traffic reports earlier in the day out of curiosity. Clear skies, smooth roads all day long. I wasn't even trying to catch her in a lie at that point. It just happened that I knew the truth. You learn a lot about someone when you stop trying to trust them and start paying attention instead. Thursday morning brought something new and strange. Jessica spent 45 minutes straightening her hair, which was completely out of character. For years, she had always worn it wavy and used to say that straightening was a pain in the ass, not worth the effort. But there she was, standing in front of the bathroom mirror with steam rising around her, gripping that flat iron like she was going to war. I told her she looked great, trying to sound normal, but she snapped back with, "Don't start acting weird." Then she walked away with her coffee, leaving the full cup untouched on the counter where it sat getting cold. It was like she had forgotten she even made it, too distracted by whatever was occupying her mind. Friday finally came around, and at exactly 6:02 p.m., she emerged from our bedroom wearing heels I hadn't seen in years. They were those dark blue stilettos I had bought her for her birthday back in 2019. She had worn them exactly once, complained that they hurt like hell, and then they disappeared into the closet graveyard where forgotten shoes go to die. But here they were now, clicking down our stairs like she was walking a runway. "I won't be late," she said, adjusting her earring in the hallway mirror with practiced precision. "Don't wait up." I didn't respond, just nodded and smiled. The way you smile when the house is on fire and you don't want anyone to notice the smoke. She left without a kiss, didn't even look back, and I stood there in the hallway for 5 full minutes, processing what I had just witnessed. Then I picked up my keys. Not because I wanted to stop her, not because I was planning some dramatic confrontation. I picked them up because I already knew where she was going, and I needed to see it for myself. I followed her car, keeping a safe distance of 3 cars back. She drove the way she always does when she's hiding something, too careful, with one hand on the wheel and her head tilted slightly like she was posing in her own reflection. There was no radio playing in my car, no background noise, nothing but the sound of my pulse banging behind my ears as I watched her navigate through the evening traffic. She didn't go to Midtown like she had claimed. She didn't even pretend to drive in that direction. Instead, she took the bypass road and then cut across the warehouse district near the old shipping yards. It was exactly the kind of detour someone takes when they think they're being clever, when they've mapped out their deception and rehearsed it until it feels natural. The whole thing was clearly planned, practiced, and executed with the precision of someone who had done this before. She pulled into a quiet parking lot behind some cheap extended stay motel, the kind of place people go when they don't want to be seen and don't care where they end up. Her car rolled to a stop, but she didn't get out right away. She sat there for almost a full minute, looking at her phone and fixing her lipstick in the rearview mirror. She wasn't checking herself nervously like someone having second thoughts. She was perfecting something, putting the finishing touches on whatever performance was about to begin. Then a truck pulled into the lot, a big black pickup with a loud engine that parked fast like it belonged there. The guy who stepped out was someone I had never seen before, but he walked with that lazy confidence of someone who knows exactly what's waiting for him inside. When Jessica finally stepped out of her car, her heels clicking against the concrete, he gave her a look I hadn't seen directed at anyone in years, not even at me. They didn't touch each other, not yet, but they didn't need to. Everything was communicated in their silence. The slight lean of her shoulder toward his, the quick glance they both made around the parking lot, the fake casual pace they maintained while walking side by side toward the lobby entrance. No one spoke, and she didn't even bother texting me an excuse. I sat there in my car, still 3 spots back with the windows up, feeling something heavy and stupid settle into my chest. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't sadness exactly. It was clarity, like finally seeing the full picture of something you've been standing too close to understand. I didn't go inside because I didn't need to. The confirmation I had been dreading was right there in front of me, playing out exactly as I had suspected it would. Instead, I drove home. The house felt quiet when I walked through the door. Too quiet, like it was embarrassed for me. I sat in the kitchen and stared at the wine glass she had left by the sink, still bearing the lipstick stain in that same red shade she had been wearing earlier. She used to wear that color for me, used to leave it on my skin like a stamp, like proof of something real between us. Now it was just a smear on cold glass, forgotten and meaningless. At 11:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Staying at Sophie's got too tipsy. Sleep tight, X. I stared at that message for a long time, reading it over and over until the words stopped making sense. Sophie, the friend who supposedly lived nearby, but had actually moved 900 miles away to Miami. The same Sophie who had posted baby pictures from Miami just 2 hours earlier, clearly establishing her location far from any cocktail lounge in Tampa. I didn't respond to the text. I just went upstairs and lay in our bed, waiting for morning like it owed me something. But I already knew this wasn't just a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was routine, a well-established pattern, and I had only just discovered the edge of it. She came home the next morning wearing a lie you could smell before she even spoke. It wasn't perfume or anything obvious. It was something else, like she had rinsed off in a gas station sink and hoped for the best. Her hair was damp, her makeup barely scrubbed away, and she was carrying those same heels in her hand like evidence she forgot to dispose of. Jessica walked into our house like she still lived there, but belonged somewhere else entirely. "Morning," she said casually, hanging her keys like nothing significant had happened in the last 12 hours. "Last night was wild. Morgan's friend knew the bartender, so we didn't even have to pay for most of our drinks." She was smiling too much, overcompensating while watching me carefully and pretending not to. The performance was polished but not perfect. There were cracks if you knew where to look. "Oh yeah?" I asked, keeping my voice controlled and level. "What time did Sophie get in?" "That's when I saw it." She blinked once, just once, but it was enough. That was the moment she flinched, not dramatically or obviously, but for half a second her brain tripped over the web she had forgotten to finish spinning. "She got there kind of late," Jessica replied, her voice cracking slightly. "You know how she is, always making an entrance." I nodded and leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch between us until it became uncomfortable. That's when she started moving faster than necessary, putting her purse away and folding a dish towel, avoiding eye contact while her hands visibly shook. "You look tired," I observed calmly. "Didn't get much sleep, I guess." She paused and forced a chuckle that sounded hollow. No one sleeps on Morgan's couch. That thing's made of bricks. Morgan, the woman I still had no proof existed. No Instagram profile, no last name, no evidence that she actually worked at the office Jessica supposedly shared space with. But I said nothing, just filed it away with all the other inconsistencies. I let Jessica run with her story, giving her enough rope to hang herself with while I continued gathering evidence of her deception. By Sunday night, I had formulated a plan. I waited until Jessica was in the shower, singing off-key like she always does when she thinks she's in the clear and safe from scrutiny. While the water was running and she was distracted, I opened her laptop. Not her phone, she was far too careful with that device, but her laptop, which she never bothered to lock because she thought it was safe in our home. Her inbox was suspiciously clean, with nothing older than 2 weeks. It was the kind of thorough deletion that only happens when someone is actively covering their tracks. But I went deeper, searching for keywords. Hampton, Friday, Morgan. That's when I finally hit the jackpot, a draft email that was never sent, just sitting there waiting like a smoking gun. The draft read, "Hey babe, can't wait for next weekend. That thing you did last time in the elevator, still thinking about it. Same place, I'll bring the tequila this time. Don't forget to leave by side lot again." Last thing I need is Tyler getting suspicious X. There was no recipient name, no context beyond the filthy implications, just casual intimacy wrapped in a wink emoji. The tone was so casual, so comfortable, like I was some kind of dog being fed scraps from the other side of a fence while someone else was eating at my table. The betrayal was right there in black and white, written in Jessica's own words. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I made copies of everything. I printed the draft, took screenshots, and created a folder with dates, times, GPS pings, and receipts. I even found tagged locations from Facebook that she had forgotten to untag. One even showed her laughing at a bowling alley in a city 2 hours away on a night she had told me she was at a client dinner. I remembered that evening clearly because I had brought her takeout from her favorite restaurant, leaving it on the counter where it sat untouched because she was never actually coming home. Monday morning arrived, and Jessica kissed me goodbye like it was any other day. I said nothing, just watched her walk out the door wearing a blazer that still had a hotel tag loop tucked under the sleeve. She didn't notice this small detail, but I did. That's when something fundamental shifted inside me. I stopped being afraid of losing her because I realized I had already lost her long ago. I couldn't eat that day. Every time I tried, my stomach would curl up like it was trying to disappear entirely. I spent the morning staring at the printed draft she had never sent, along with all the screenshots laid out in front of me on the kitchen table like pieces of evidence in a case file. It felt like I was preparing to prosecute someone I had promised to love forever. The worst part was that I kept looking for a way out. For her. For some smallest detail that would prove I was wrong. Maybe this was all some kind of sick joke or a disgusting misunderstanding. Some dumb game between coworkers that had gone too far in tone, but not in reality. But no, everything was too intentional, too calculated, too carefully planned to be anything other than exactly what it appeared to be. The phone records revealed a disturbing pattern, 30-minute gaps filled with nothing but calls to a single number. No name associated with it, just digits that appeared sometimes twice a day, following a routine like clockwork. The pattern was unmistakable. Tuesday afternoons, Fridays before she got home, and every second Saturday. This wasn't random or impulsive. This was scheduled intimacy with someone else. I decided to call the number using a burner app on my phone. When he answered with a simple, "Yeah," I froze completely. My mouth wouldn't work, and my throat dried up like it was packed with cotton. He sounded normal, calm, like someone who had no idea he was being dialed into the complete destruction of someone's world. I hung up immediately, my hands shaking as I ended the call. That evening, I watched Jessica eat dinner across from me. Spaghetti, her favorite dish that I had cooked the same way I always did. She barely seemed to notice the food or my presence. "You're quiet tonight," she observed between bites, twirling noodles on her fork like she hadn't spent the past month building a secret life in dirty motels and constructing elaborate weekend lies. "Long day," I muttered, unable to look at her directly. She reached across the table and touched my hand with fingers that felt cold, foreign, like they belonged to someone else entirely. I stared at those fingers as if seeing them for the first time. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice taking on that manipulative sweetness I was beginning to recognize. "Maybe we should go away soon. Just you and me, a weekend getaway. No phones, no work, just reset a little bit." In that exact moment, staring at her across our dinner table, I realized she wasn't just lying to me anymore. She was trying to manage me. This wasn't guilt or regret speaking. It was control, a pacifier disguised as a promise. She didn't want to fix anything between us. She wanted to keep me quiet and compliant while she continued tearing our marriage apart at a comfortable pace. I pulled my hand back from her touch, and she blinked with that tilted head expression she used when trying to read people. "Everything okay?" she asked with feigned concern. "You tell me," I replied flatly. She flinched, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. What's that supposed to mean? Her voice carried a defensive edge that hadn't been there moments before. I stood up slowly and picked up my phone, opening the screenshot of her unsent draft email. Without saying another word, I held the screen out toward her, letting the evidence speak for itself. She stared at the phone for several long seconds, then looked back at me. No panic, no gasping or sobbing, no dramatic collapse like a guilty actress caught in the act. Jessica just looked at the damning evidence and said, "You went through my stuff." In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that there would be no confession, no tearful apology, and not a single ounce of genuine shame or remorse. There would only be attack, deflection, and strategy. "You went through my things," she repeated, this time louder, as if increasing the volume could somehow rewrite the reality that was unfolding in front of us both. I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" I asked. "This is your response?" She stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor behind her. She crossed her arms like she was the one who had been betrayed, like she was the victim in this scenario. "You don't trust me. That's the real problem here." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound burst out of me like pressure escaping from a broken seal. "You've been meeting him at motels, Jessica." "I work, Tyler. I travel. I meet people. I have friends," she shot back with practiced indignation. "Friends that you bring tequila to?" I pressed. "Friends you tell to use the side lot so I don't get suspicious?" Her mouth snapped shut immediately. I could see the fire in her eyes, but there was no apology behind them, no remorse or shame. Only anger at being caught. "You're pathetic," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "I work my ass off to make this marriage something meaningful, and you're sitting here like some sad detective, obsessed with conspiracies and paranoia." I stared at her as something broke inside me, not loudly or violently, but like a string that had been pulled too tight and finally just snapped. The break was silent and clean, but it was complete. I walked out of the kitchen, not out of the house, but out of us. Because in that moment, I realized she wasn't sorry about what she had done. She wasn't even scared of losing me. She simply didn't care if she did. I slept in the guest room that night, surrounded by a different kind of silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of rest. It was sterile, like the air in a hospital waiting room, clean but anxious, charged with uncertainty. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell we had gotten to this point. It wasn't just about the lies or the other man or the cheap motels. It was about this version of Jessica, this person I was looking at who seemed like a complete stranger. This wasn't the woman I had married. This was someone new, someone who had been trained and practiced, hollowed out and rebuilt for performance and deception. I kept trying to rewind everything in my mind, searching for the exact moment when she had shifted, when she had decided I wasn't enough, when she had started needing him instead of me. But it didn't matter because I wasn't going to find that moment. I realized I hadn't been part of the decision at all. She had made it entirely on her own, without consulting me or considering what it would do to us. The next morning, Jessica acted like nothing had happened. There was no mention of our confrontation, no acknowledgement of the screenshot I had shown her, no reference to the explosive argument that had torn through our kitchen just hours before. She was humming in the kitchen while making eggs, like she hadn't just emotionally eviscerated me 12 hours earlier and walked away whistling. She set a plate in front of me like it was some kind of peace offering. "You need to eat," she said with forced cheerfulness. I didn't touch the food, couldn't even bring myself to look at it. "You're seriously going to sulk like a child?" she asked, crossing her arms in that familiar pose of mock exasperation. "We had a disagreement, Tyler. That's all this was." I stared at her in complete disbelief. "A disagreement?" She actually smiled, a cold, calculated expression that didn't reach her eyes. She tilted her head with that patronizing look I was beginning to hate. "You're twisting everything out of proportion. That message wasn't even sent, remember? And that makes it better somehow?" "It was a joke," she said dismissively. "Oh, sure, hilarious, I forgot to laugh." That's when her mask slipped completely. "You know what your problem is?" she snapped, stepping closer with venom in her voice. "You're boring. You're so desperate to be the good guy, the perfect husband, that you don't even see how miserable you make the people around you." I blinked, stunned by this new twist of the knife. Not only was she refusing to show any remorse, but now she wanted me to feel like I had somehow driven her to this betrayal. "You think this is about him?" she continued, her voice rising. "It's not about him at all. It's about you and the fact that I felt dead inside for the last 2 years. You just didn't bother to notice." She spun the narrative that quickly one second she was exposed and caught red-handed, and the next she had somehow positioned herself as the victim. Suddenly, I was the villain in a story where I had been the only one actually trying to keep us from falling apart. I stood up slowly, and her confident smile vanished instantly. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. She blinked in shock. "Excuse me? You heard me perfectly. This is my house too," she protested, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "No," I replied calmly. "It's a house that I pay for, in a marriage that you've been checking out of for months. You don't get to use that word anymore. Our. We. Us. You gave up those rights when you started planning secret weekends with someone else." I could see that this hit her hard. There was a tiny crack in her carefully constructed mask, not guilt or shame, but offense. Like I had finally spoken out of turn in a play she thought she was directing. She scoffed with bitter disbelief. "Wow, look at you acting like a man now, huh? Where was this backbone when I actually needed it?" "You didn't need a man," I said, meeting her glare directly. "You needed an audience, and I stopped clapping." That seemed to hit something deep, because she stormed upstairs and slammed the bedroom door with enough force to rattle the picture frames on the walls. I just stood there in the kitchen, finally feeling something close to steady for the first time in weeks. It wasn't rage or heartbreak, it was something much cleaner. I was simply done. Later that evening, she tried a different approach. She came back downstairs with her voice all sugar slick and manipulative, saying we had both been heated and that we needed to rethink things like adults. It was the same trap I had walked into dozens of times before, but this time I could see the wires. "I'll call a lawyer on Monday," I said matter-of-factly. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice cracking like she was having a heart attack. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she actually looked nervous. She should have been, because I wasn't looking for reasons to forgive her anymore. I was preparing to walk away for good. Sunday arrived like a reset button that didn't work. She stayed in the bedroom most of the day while I stayed out of it. The house felt too quiet, but not in a peaceful way, more like when the power goes out and everything feels off balance, still but electrically charged, like something is about to spark and catch fire. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, not reading, not scrolling through my phone, just existing in the silence. My phone would light up occasionally with texts I didn't bother answering, friends checking in, coworkers dropping weekend nonsense into my inbox. But the only message I kept rereading was the one Jessica had sent that night she stayed at the motel. "Staying at Sophie's got too tipsy. Sleep tight, X." That little X at the end haunted me now. That kiss, that small gesture of fake affection, it hit differently when you understood what it really was. It wasn't love or even basic consideration. It was punctuation to a lie, like spraying perfume on a trash bag and calling it a gift. Around 4 p.m., Jessica finally emerged from the bedroom. Her hair was brushed, and she was wearing a hoodie and leggings with no makeup, clearly playing the part now of the tired, misunderstood wife. She walked over to the refrigerator, grabbed the orange juice, and then just stood there like she was waiting for her script to appear on the wall. "You've had your tantrum," she said softly, trying a completely different tone. "Now can we talk like actual people?" "People talk," I replied without looking up. "You lie." She exhaled slowly, not with frustration but with the kind of control that comes from resetting yourself, measuring your tone, and choosing your next mask carefully. "You want to believe I cheated? Fine," she said, her voice taking on that practiced tremor of someone who had rehearsed this speech. "You want to believe I'm some kind of villain? Go ahead. But this marriage hasn't been alive in a long time, Tyler. You just didn't want to admit it." There it was again, the masterful spin. I had caught her red-handed, confronted her with undeniable evidence, and somehow I was still supposed to believe that I was chasing ghosts, that my anger and hurt were the real problem here, not her months of calculated deception. She sat down across from me at the table, hands folded, eyes taking on that glassy quality that comes not from genuine tears, but from someone who had practiced looking vulnerable in the mirror. "I miss us," she said, her voice trembling just slightly in what felt like a rehearsed performance. "I miss who we used to be before life got so heavy and complicated." I leaned in, keeping my voice quiet and calm. "What's his name?" The silence that followed was deafening. She blinked once, then shook her head with the softest, most condescending laugh I'd ever heard from her. "You really don't get it, do you?" she said, looking at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into her carefully constructed fantasy and asked to see the wires behind the magic trick. "I'm asking you one last time," I said, my patience completely exhausted. "What's his name?" She stared at me like I was disrupting something she had worked very hard to build. Then her expression shifted to something that looked almost like pride. "Kevin," she said. The name landed between us like a dropped plate, sharp and final. "Kevin," I repeated, letting the reality of it sink in. "My coworker. Technically, he's my boss," she said quickly, almost proudly, like confessing was supposed to earn her points. Like I was supposed to be impressed by the boldness of it all. "You said it was just texting," I reminded her, though I already knew the answer. She shrugged with casual indifference. "It was at first." "And the motels?" Another shrug, even more dismissive. "He's married. We had to be careful." My jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "So I was just the guy you came home to when your games were over?" "You were the guy who didn't notice I was dying inside," she shot back. "Kevin, listen to me." I slammed my hand against the table, not out of violence, but out of pure, visceral disbelief. "You were lying, Jessica. Not dying. Lying. There's a difference." She stood up abruptly, her voice turning sharp and defensive. "You think I wanted it to end this way? You think I planned for everything to fall apart like this?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I absolutely do." She didn't answer, and she didn't need to, because in her silence, I could see everything clearly for the first time. The late-night showers, the mysterious Friday meetings, the lipstick and hotel receipts, that smirk she thought I hadn't noticed. It had all been planned, every single step of it. I grabbed my folder containing all the evidence I had gathered. The texts, the draft email, the phone records, everything. I dropped it all on the table between us like a dealer laying down cards in a game I had never agreed to play. "I'm filing on Monday," I announced. She didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't collapse in dramatic fashion. She just stared at the papers scattered across our kitchen table. In that moment, for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw her true reaction. It wasn't fear, it wasn't guilt, and it certainly wasn't love. It was pure inconvenience. I hadn't been her partner in this marriage. I had been her obstacle. And now I was finally in her way. I didn't sleep again that Sunday night, but not because I was crushed or heartbroken anymore. Not because I was pacing around the house with rage consuming me. That part had passed, leaving something much colder in its wake. What I felt now was clean, almost clinical. Like when your body throws up everything toxic and afterward there's nothing left to feel except the distant relief of survival. I found myself watching her sleep. She still snored lightly on her side, with one hand curled under the pillow. Like everything was perfectly fine. Like this wasn't the wreckage of something that had once been sacred between us. Like she hadn't systematically gutted our marriage and now had the nerve to look peaceful sleeping in its ashes. Monday morning came and I dressed before sunrise. I shaved carefully, put on a clean shirt and tie the works. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. Not because of grief or devastation, but because I looked in control again for the first time in months, maybe longer. Jessica noticed my early routine as I buttoned my cuffs. She leaned against the bathroom doorframe with coffee in hand, trying to act casual. "You're up early," she observed. "Lawyer appointment," I replied without looking at her. She paused, as if hoping I would blink first, that this was all some elaborate bluff. "Tyler," she said carefully, "we don't have to do this right now. We could take some time, think things through." "Funny," I said, finally meeting her eyes in the mirror. "That's exactly what I said before you decided to wreck our marriage." I grabbed my keys and walked past her toward the stairs. She followed me halfway down, suddenly barefoot and softer, trying a completely different approach. "You don't want to talk at all? Try to work through this like adults?" I turned around, feeling as calm as a surgeon preparing for a procedure. "We talked, Jessica. You gave me all the answers I needed. Kevin, 8 months, motel receipts, sneaking around behind my back while I was at home doing your fucking laundry." Her mouth opened and closed, like she was grasping for words that wouldn't come. The mask slipped completely for a second, revealing not the confident manipulator, but someone who was simply scrambling to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond her reach. "What happened to you?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine bewilderment. "You were never this cold before." "What happened?" I said, stepping closer so she could see exactly how serious I was. "You happened." I left her standing there in our hallway and drove to the lawyer's office. The building was warm and comfortable, decorated in neutral colors, with the faint smell of printer ink and fresh coffee hanging in the air. I sat across from a woman named Valerie who wore square glasses and spoke with the voice of a judge who had already made her decision before you said a word. She had probably seen this exact scenario hundreds of times before. Valerie took one look at the folder I handed her. Timestamps, screenshots, phone records, all meticulously organized, and nodded like she was reviewing a case she could solve in her sleep. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. 8 months minimum, but probably longer, I replied. "And you're absolutely sure you want to proceed with this?" "Yeah," I said without hesitation. "I'm done playing house with a stranger." She leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "You'll need to separate your assets? Any children involved?" "No." "Good. That simplifies things considerably. I'll start filing the paperwork today. You'll need to prepare yourself for her response. If she wants to fight this, it's going to get loud before it gets quiet again." I nodded firmly. "Let her be loud. I've lived in her silence long enough." When I returned home, Jessica was sitting on the couch with her legs tucked up like a child, trying to rewind time through sheer force of will. "Did you really go through with it?" she asked as soon as I walked through the door. "Yes." "And you really filed papers?" "Yes." She exhaled hard, and I could see the panic poorly disguised behind her irritation. "So that's it? No counseling? No trying to work things out?" "You already tried working things out," I said, walking past her toward the kitchen. "With someone else." She stood up quickly, her composure finally cracking. "This is unbelievable." "No," I said, turning to face her one more time. "What's unbelievable is how you pretended to love me while planning your exit strategy with a guy who kisses his wife goodbye every morning and then meets you in Hampton Inn parking lots." That hit her exactly where I intended it to. Her mouth twisted with something that looked like pain, but I knew better now. "You don't understand the whole situation," she said weakly. "No, Jessica," I replied. "I finally do understand, completely." I opened the bedroom door and pulled out an empty suitcase, dropping it onto our bed with deliberate finality. "What are you doing?" she asked, though the answer was obvious. "Helping you pack." "I'm not leaving," she said defiantly. "Yes, you are." She stepped forward, heat rising in her voice for the first time. "You can't throw me out of my own house." I met her glare directly, feeling completely calm for the first time in this entire ordeal. "Watch me." For the first time since this nightmare had started, I was the one with the power. And I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging or pleading for explanations. I was simply finished with all of it. She didn't move at first, just stood there like someone who had never actually faced real consequences before. Like the rules of the world had shifted overnight, and she was the last person to get the memo about how things actually worked. Then she laughed, a short, bitter, hollow sound that carried no genuine humor. "You think you're so noble now, don't you? Like you're the hero in this story." "No," I said, meaning every single word. "I'm just not your fool anymore." She didn't leave that night, of course. People like Jessica never do what they're told when they're told to do it. They wait until they can twist the story around, until they can make you look like the villain walking out on them. So she stayed, pouting in the bedroom, not talking to me, slamming drawers louder than necessary, waiting for me to flinch or back down. I didn't. Instead, I made her presence feel like that of a guest who had seriously overstayed their welcome. No arguments, no small talk, no acknowledgement of her dramatic performances. I spoke when absolutely necessary, and nothing more. Tuesday came with more of the same silence. I worked from home while she worked from anywhere but here. Coffee shops, alleged meetings, wherever her shadowy second life had taken root and flourished. I didn't ask where she was going, and I didn't care anymore. That evening, she walked into the kitchen holding her phone like it was a weapon, her face tight with barely controlled emotion. "So Kevin's wife messaged me," she announced, clearly expecting some kind of reaction from me. I looked up from my laptop with complete indifference. "Good. She deserves to know." "Also good," I added after a pause. "She wants to meet with me," Jessica continued, watching my face carefully for any sign of the jealousy or possessiveness she was probably hoping to provoke. I raised an eyebrow. "You should definitely do that." Her lips tightened into a thin line. You're really enjoying this, aren't you? No, I said, leaning back in my chair. But I'm completely done protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. She began pacing around the kitchen like she wanted to scream but was holding it back. You think this is all black and white, Tyler? You think I wanted to end up like this? That I planned for everything to fall apart? I think you chose this repeatedly, I replied calmly. Every single time you had a chance to stop. You're acting like I'm some kind of monster, she said, her voice rising with defensive anger. Because you lied, Jessica. You lied with a smile on your face. You looked me in the eye and planned nights in cheap motels while I made you dinner and folded your goddamn laundry. That's not a mistake or a moment of weakness. That's a lifestyle choice. She stared at me with her jaw clenched, and for a moment I could see her crack. Not break completely, just flicker. Her eyes got glossy and her mouth wavered like she wanted to say something real and honest for once. But then she didn't. She turned around and muttered under her breath, You always think you're so righteous. And that was it. The exact moment I stopped wondering if any part of her had ever truly loved me. Later that night, I received an email. Not from Jessica, but from Kevin's wife. Her name was Lisa, and the subject line was refreshingly simple. I think we should talk. She had apparently found my name through motel records. Kevin hadn't been as careful as he thought he was being, and Jessica had made the stupid mistake of using our joint credit card once. It was a careless error, but there was something almost poetic about it. We arranged to meet on Thursday at a neutral location, a cafe in Midtown. When I told Jessica about this plan that night, she laughed loud and nasty, like she was watching a comedy show. Oh, so now you two are forming some kind of support group? Going to cry over croissants and compare notes? No, I said evenly. We're going to compare notes, build timelines, and do some math. You know, figure out the truth. She stormed off and slammed the door so hard that picture frames rattled on the walls throughout the house. The next morning, I woke up to find that half her closet was empty. She hadn't said goodbye, hadn't left a note or sent a text. There was just absence, missing toothbrush, empty hangers, and the telling silence of someone who thought that leaving without any explanation would somehow give her the final word in our relationship. But it didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like weight being cut loose from my shoulders. As I sat there alone in the living room that was now truly mine for the first time in months, I realized something strange and liberating. I wasn't just healing from this betrayal. I was waking up from something I hadn't even realized I'd been sleeping through. Thursday arrived, and at 10:07 p.m., I found myself sitting in the Midtown Cafe. Light jazz was playing in the background, and the air was filled with the smell of burnt espresso and sugar. I spotted Lisa immediately when she walked in. Neat hair pulled back, white cardigan, no makeup, with eyes that were sharp but tired. She looked like a woman who had had the wind knocked out of her but was still standing because someone had to. She saw me and gave the smallest nod. No smile, no pleasantries. We were here for truth, not comfort. When she sat across from me, she didn't waste any time with small talk. Kevin and your wife were still seeing each other as of last Friday, she said, sliding a small folder across the table toward me. I found the receipts. He booked the same room 3 times this month, paying cash every time, but I recognized the pattern. I flipped through the documents slowly. There it was again. The same location, the same time frames. 2 of the dates matched perfectly with days Jessica had told me she was going to yoga after work. She had never even owned a yoga mat. Lisa took a sip of her coffee, her expression stone-faced. I put a GPS tracker in his car last week. I blinked in surprise. You're smarter than both of them, she gave a short, bitter laugh. I'm thorough. Not that it helped much in the end. He confessed last night, but not because he felt guilty about what he'd done. He confessed because he saw me packing his suitcase. We sat in silence for a long moment. 2 complete strangers who had been stitched together by the same wound, the same betrayal. He blamed me, she said quietly, staring into her coffee cup. Said I made him feel small, like I had somehow forced him to find someone who admired him and made him feel important. I looked at her and without thinking said, She told me I was boring. We both laughed at the same time, short and bitter, the kind of laugh you let out when the pain has gone dull, and you're just marveling at the complete absurdity of it all. He's not coming home, she said matter-of-factly. She already left, I replied. Lisa nodded like she had expected as much. Do you want to know something strange that I discovered? What? They had a code system. When I looked through his phone, I found a saved contact under the name Morgan. That's the fake identity she was using. My stomach dropped. Morgan, the fake coworker. The one Jessica swore up and down was real. She even gave her a fake personality and backstory. That's how far she was willing to go to protect the illusion, Lisa said. She created an entire character with a detailed backstory, a ghost she could use to throw you off the trail whenever you got suspicious. I shook my head slowly, still processing it. She lied even when telling the truth would have been easier. Lisa stared out the window for a second. They always do that. Because lying isn't really about protecting you from the truth. It's about protecting their ability to keep doing what they're doing without interference. She slid one more paper toward me across the table, a printout of a photograph. It showed them together, Kevin and Jessica, outside the motel. Her arm was hooked through his, and they were both laughing like teenagers skipping class, like nothing else in the world existed except their secret game. I looked at the photo and didn't even flinch. I was numb now, but it was the kind of numbness that meant freedom. It was like the silence that comes after a fire alarm finally shuts off. Peaceful, clean, final. Lisa watched me carefully for a moment. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, and I actually meant it. "Yeah, I really am." We didn't talk much more after that. We just exchanged a few quiet observations and shared some mutual nods of understanding. By the end of our meeting, I think we both felt the strange closure that comes from knowing the other half of the story, from having all the pieces finally fit together. When we stood up to leave, Lisa reached into her purse and handed me a slip of paper. "Divorce attorney," she explained. "She's sharp and doesn't lose cases." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Thanks." She left without any dramatic goodbye. No hug, no drawn-out emotional scene. Just a clean walk out the door and into the street like the survivor she was proving herself to be. When I got home, Jessica's car was sitting in the driveway. She was standing at the front door with no suitcase this time. No visible rage, just arms crossed and eyes wide with something that looked like panic. "You met her," she said as soon as she saw me. It wasn't a question. "Yes, and we shared notes," I replied, walking toward the door. "She knows everything now," Jessica continued, blocking my path slightly. Her jaw clenched as she processed this information. "I don't think you understand what you've done here." "No, Jessica," I said, stepping past her to unlock the door. "You don't understand what you did." I closed the door behind me, and this time I didn't invite her in. She didn't knock, didn't pound on the door, didn't make any dramatic scenes. She just stood on the porch for nearly 10 minutes after I closed the door, waiting for some version of me to open it. Maybe she was waiting for the old me, the one she could smooth talk or guilt trip or gaslight into resetting this whole disaster like it had never happened. But that man didn't live here anymore. Eventually, I heard her walk away. Her heels clicked on the concrete with slow, almost uncertain steps, like she couldn't believe I had actually meant it this time. But I did mean it, completely and finally. The next morning, I filed the final paperwork. Valerie, my attorney, slid the documents across her desk with professional efficiency. "She hasn't contested anything yet," she informed me. "If she decides to fight this, we're ready for whatever she throws at us. But something tells me she won't." "She's proud," I said, "but she's not stupid." Valerie nodded knowingly. "Sometimes the ones who play the game the hardest are the first to quit when they realize they've already lost." I signed the papers, and it was done. No ceremony, no tears, no dramatic moment of closure. Just ink on paper, cold and final. It was the end of a marriage that had slowly bled out long before either of us had been willing to admit it was dying. A week passed in relative peace. Jessica moved the rest of her belongings in complete silence. She never looked at me during these trips, never attempted conversation, or offered any kind of apology or closure. She just made efficient trips back and forth to her car, loading up her possessions like she was helping a stranger move out. She left behind a few things: old shoes, a coffee mug I had gotten her during a trip to Chicago, and a sweatshirt that had originally been mine. I threw it all in a box and set it by the trash. Those remnants of our shared life meant nothing to me anymore. Kevin was gone too, or so I heard through Lisa's occasional updates. According to her last message, he had begged to come back after realizing that Jessica wasn't the fantasy he had built around her. Apparently, motel room passion and stolen weekends didn't translate well into real life. Lisa didn't take him back, which proved she was smarter than both of them combined. As for Jessica, she texted me exactly once more. No greeting, no signature, just a simple message. "I hope someday you understand why I did what I did." I stared at that text for a long time, reading it over and over until the words lost all meaning. Then I deleted it without responding, because I did understand completely. She had done it because she wanted more than what we had, because she felt entitled to excitement and adventure beyond our marriage, because my loyalty and faithfulness had become boring to her, and his attention had made her feel alive in ways I apparently couldn't. She thought she could have both without facing any real consequences. She hadn't cheated to fix something that was broken between us. She had cheated because she had broken something sacred and didn't care enough to stop destroying it. The truth was that people like Jessica never actually want understanding from the people they've hurt. What they want is absolution, forgiveness, a clean slate that lets them feel better about their choices. And I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Now I'm rebuilding my life piece by piece. The silence in the house isn't heavy anymore. It's clean and peaceful. I eat dinner when I want to eat it, sleep through the night without waiting for the next lie to come crashing down around me. I'm seeing friends again, breathing without constantly anticipating the next deception, living without walking on eggshells around someone else's guilty conscience. If I've learned anything through this entire mess, it's this. Pay attention to the little things. The sudden need for personal space, the overused stories that don't quite add up, the name that pops up once and then never gets mentioned again. Notice the messages they don't send and the ones they quickly delete when they think you're not looking. Most importantly, listen to your instincts. They're usually whispering the truth long before the explosion happens, long before everything comes crashing down around you. But more than anything else, don't beg for love. Don't crawl and plead for clarity. Don't try to patch a hole that someone is actively digging from the inside of your relationship. If someone wants to betray you, they will find a way to do it. Your job isn't to stop them or to convince them not to hurt you. Your job is to see them clearly for who they really are, and then, when it's all out in the open and undeniable, to walk away with your dignity intact. Quiet, proud, and whole. Because here's what I've discovered. Betrayal isn't the end of you. It's actually the beginning of a version of yourself that no longer accepts anything less than complete honesty and genuine respect. It's the start of a life where you refuse to settle for breadcrumbs of affection from someone who's serving full meals to someone else. The person who emerges from betrayal is stronger, wiser, and infinitely more selective about who gets access to their heart. They've learned to trust their instincts, to value their own worth, and to walk away from anything that doesn't serve their highest good. And I promise you this with absolute certainty. The air on the other side of betrayal is lighter than you ever imagined it could be. When you stop carrying the weight of someone else's lies, when you stop making excuses for someone else's choices, when you finally put down the burden of trying to love someone back to life who never intended to stay, that's when you realize what freedom actually feels like. The silence isn't empty anymore. It's full of possibility. The space they left behind isn't a void. It's room for something real to grow. And the person staring back at you in the mirror isn't broken or damaged goods. They're someone who chose themselves. Someone who refused to accept less than they deserved. Someone who walked through fire and came out stronger on the other side. That's the person I am now. That's the person I choose to be every single day. And if you're reading this because you're living through your own version of this nightmare, know that you have the same choice. You can choose to be the person who stays and accepts the lies, or you can choose to be the person who sees the truth and walks towards something better. The choice is always yours. And you deserve so much more than someone who treats your love like a consolation prize while they chase their real desires elsewhere. You deserve someone who chooses you every single day, not someone who keeps you around as a backup plan while they explore other options. Trust me on this. You're stronger than you think. You're worth more than you know, and the life waiting for you on the other side of this pain is better than anything you're clinging to right now. Let go, walk away, choose yourself. The rest will follow.